Hello everyone, and welcome in this first episodes of the Global Critical Chronicles. And my first guest would be the Professor Carlos Seri, a Brazilian professor from the University of Sao Paulo. I will let him just to make a brief presentation.
Hi, Asir. Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, my name is Carlos Serri. I'm professor at the University of São Paulo in Brazil, working in the agricultural sector. We are trying to understand the relationships between soil, plant, animal, and atmosphere. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
You worked a lot in the deforestation in Brazil. So could you explain to me how does deforestation affect the soil quality, like in tropical soils in Brazil, for example, and in Morocco?
Yeah, deforestation is not a good thing for soil health, because once you clear and cut, slash and burn the native vegetation, you are losing a lot of this carbon, this plant material input. And this is good for the microorganisms to sustain a lot of mechanisms and processes that make our soils healthy. So when you have deforestation, in addition to burn all this plant material, and we are talking about 100 tons of carbon being released as CO2 to the atmosphere, you also are eliminating the input of organic material to the soil. So that's not good. In Brazil, we have 63% of the territory under native vegetation. I think it's one of the most preserved countries worldwide, 63%. But unfortunately, we are clearing some of this land, and we should not do that.
Yeah, you've come, Professor, to a very good point, which is the carbon sequestration. Could you explain to us what is carbon sequestration?
Sure, carbon sequestration, in a simple way, is how we can remove part of the carbon that is in the atmosphere and transfer this carbon from the atmosphere to the plant and the soil. Plants do photosynthesis. And when they do photosynthesis, they remove part of the CO2 from the atmosphere. Now this carbon that was in a gas format, CO2, is now in the plant material, in more than 60 compounds with carbon. This is carbon sequestration in the plant material. But part of this carbon from the plant can be transferred to the soil. So when the plant dies, microorganisms can transform, can decompose the plant material, and part of the carbon is now stored in the soil. So it's a carbon sequestration in the soil. So we can remove carbon from the atmosphere to the plant, and from the plant to the soil.
So the soil is like a sink.
Yes, it's a sink. And globally, we have 3 times, 4 times more carbon in the soil than we have in the plant. So it's a lot of carbon that we can accumulate into the soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here we could talk about like the hugest problem of this century, which is the climate change. Like, could you explain us what is climate change, and is it a difference? Like, is there a difference between the climate change and the global warming? Because we are finding like these two terms in the news, for example, but we like the large audience couldn't differentiate between these two terms.
Yeah, actually, one is a consequence of the other. So what is happening is that we, as human beings, since the Industrial Revolution, we are emitting to the atmosphere too much gases. And some of those gases are greenhouse gases. This means that they interact with infrared radiation that was supposed to leave troposphere, stratosphere, and other atmosphere layers. But because of those gases, this energy stays closer to the soil surface, to the earth surface. And the amount of gases are increasing, the concentration is increasing, and this is causing a global warming, because this energy is not leaving the planet. So this is the global warming. And as a consequence of the global warming, Earth needs to adapt and is changing the climate. So climate change is a consequence of global warming, and global warming is a consequence of higher concentration of greenhouse gases due to our human beings' activities. 73% of the gases come from fossil fuel burning. 20% comes from land use change, for example, deforestation, and agriculture. So that's the issue. If we want to reduce global warming and consequently climate change, we have to change our behavior and reduce fossil fuel burning, reduce deforestation, and improve agricultural systems.
Could we be optimistic about having a good path about diminishing the CO2, or are we tending to have a higher CO2 emissions?
Unfortunately, the second option that you just gave us, you just described it. Unfortunately, fossil fuel burning is increasing. Deforestation worldwide is increasing. Agricultural emission is increasing. So we are discussing a lot among countries, decision makers, they are discussing a lot. But in my opinion, we are not acting as we should. Of course we have to discuss, but more we have to do to put into action some activities of adaptation and mitigation. We have to emit less gas to the atmosphere and remove more as carbon sequestration. We have to intensify that. We don't want to face even harder and more intense climate change events. So we need to change, not now, yesterday, last year, not the future. It's now, because we are losing time. In average temperature of 3 degrees above the mean temperature that we are used to. So this is a catastrophe. We should not do that.
3 degree might seems unacceptable increase of temperature, but as an expert, is 3 degree a lot of?
It's a lot. We are talking about an average value, a mean value of 3 degrees in addition to the temperature we have today. And in some places, this is more than 3, because 3 is an average. Just to give the broad audience, we have estimates for each country in the world. And some countries, like Brazil, they may suffer even more than 3 degrees. And you know what is sad, what I am worried about, is that areas today that are considered semi-arid or arid areas, they tend to become even more drier and drier. And this is a problem, because if we are suffering from water shortage, and this tends to be even worse in the future. We have to stop this pattern, this behavior, and there are ways to do that.
I would ask you a question that I love to ask experts. So if we put you as a Brazilian minister, since you are Brazilian, what would be the first decision to make in this order?
Yeah, I hope I will not be a minister. I prefer to work as a professor. But if I were, the first thing to be done in the case of Brazil is to stop illegal deforestation. 85% of deforestation happening in the Amazon is illegal. We have to stop that immediately. And the second, you asked me only one, but the second thing to be done is to expand the adoption of best agricultural management practices, because they can not only emit less gas to the atmosphere, but also increase carbon sequestration. And we have to do that because we need to produce food, fiber, biofuels. We are wearing something from the agricultural sector. We are eating food from the agricultural sector. In Brazil, we have ethanol. We don't use gasoline or diesel. It's from the agricultural sector. So it's a biofuel, it's not a fossil fuel. Those come from the agricultural sector, so we need to make it even stronger. Because according to the FAO, the world would need to increase 20% of its food production by 2050, 20% increase in food production. But this is not going to happen in all countries. So FAO told us in Brazil, you have to increase 40% because some countries will not increase their food production. So you have to compensate and produce 40% increased food production. But we have to do that without emitting too much gas to the atmosphere, but also sequestering carbon. This is a big challenge. So we need help from other countries like Morocco and others. All together we can do that.
Mhm. So maybe a message to the policymakers.
The message, they know. We are repeating this all the time. Stop discussing and start implementing. Implementing actions to reduce deforestation, to increase regenerative agricultural practices, rehabilitate degraded land, to tackle water, not only amount but quality, biodiversity, soil, plant, animal interactions, and climate as a consequence. So science in different countries are given the ways, the suggestions, the recommendations on what to do. We have to put in practice. That's the message.
Thank you very much, Professor Carlos, for this nice talk. And hope to see you very soon in another episodes on the times of UMSXP with another guest. Thank you.